Well, the importance of copper in the human history cannot really be overstated. From the Bronze Age onwards, copper has really been at the center of every single technological transition, and today's world is no exception. It is ultimately copper that enables us to transition away from fossil fuels.
Copper has been used for more than 10,000 years, starting in the Middle East. Around 6,000 years ago, Mesopotamians started to make bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin. This was a major breakthrough as the tin hardened the soft copper, which was particularly important for making better weapons. The malleability of copper and its excellent electrical and thermal conductivity have long been known. In fact, after silver, copper has the second highest electrical and thermal conductivity of all pure metals. So, during the Industrial Revolution and the start of the electrification of the industrial and domestic lives of the 19th century, copper again played a central stage as people realized that copper was the best and cheapest metal to use in electrical wiring. Ever since then, all industry and pretty much all the technology we consumers use on a daily basis rely heavily on the availability of copper. Electricity production, transmission and distribution, as well as telecommunications and internet cabling rely on copper. Likewise, both domestic and industrial buildings need copper wiring and plumbing, and copper is also sometimes used as roofing material. Copper is needed elsewhere in our homes too, not only in electronics such as the TV, computers and mobile phones, but in all the house appliances such as fridges and freezers. Cars, trains and planes need a lot of copper too for electric wiring and in the metal alloys used for engines, brakes and so on. And the machinery used in industrial production of our food and consumer goods needs copper. And our need for copper is growing.
So copper is hugely important for our modern lifestyles, and especially now as we move into the energy transition. All the infrastructure and technologies that we need to make that happen require vast amounts of copper.
Energy production, transmission and distribution, as well as wiring of our homes and cars already takes up more than half of the copper we use today. But as we transition away from fossil fuels, we are going to have to accelerate the building of lower carbon energy sources such as wind turbines and solar farms. For example, wind turbines, about 3.5 tons of copper is needed per megawatt produced to build the cabling, wiring and transformers. And offshore wind farms will need even more copper, about 3 times that. Globally, it has been estimated that building wind energy alone will demand a total of 5.5 million tons of copper between 2018 and 2028. As for solar power, you need copper for the heat exchangers, cabling and wiring. About 5.5 tons of copper is needed for each megawatt produced in a solar power system. And connecting all the new energy sources to the grid requires vast amounts of copper to build the cabling and transformer stations. What's more, as we gradually abandoning fossil fuel powered transport, building electric vehicles and their charging infrastructure also requires a lot more copper. For example, an electric vehicle needs 3 to 6 times more copper than a traditional combustion engine car.
So we will need a lot of copper to build all the infrastructure and technologies that we need in the energy transition.
We use more than 25 million tons of copper annually, and the demand has been steadily increasing in the past 10 to 15 years. In 2022, we used about 7 million tons more copper annually than we did in 2010, and the growth in demand is accelerating. Much research has gone into how the energy transition and the ambition to limit global warming to under 2 degrees is going to affect demand for metals. The exact estimates vary, but all research shows that a rapid energy transition and the ever-growing global population will increase the demand in pretty much all metals we use today, including copper. According to McKinsey Consultancy, for example, the annual copper demand will increase to around 37 million tons by 2031. That's more than 10 million tons more, or around 40% more, in the next 8 years or so. Some estimates predict that between now and 2050, we will have to mine more copper than has ever been mined in total during the entire human history. Price of copper has already been increasing, and it is now about 4 times higher than 20 years ago. So there is a great need to find and mine more copper, which includes better understanding copper deposits and the geology behind their formation.
But let's now have a look at where in the geological environment copper occurs.
Copper is one of the few metals that occur in nature in its native metallic form, which also explains why it is probably the first metal to be used by humans. But usually copper is bound into minerals, and copper as an element is found in tiny amounts in pretty much every rock type on Earth. But to form ore deposits, it needs to be concentrated into native copper or copper-bearing ore minerals. Before processing methods became more advanced, copper carbonate hydroxides, malachites and azurites were the main ore minerals. But in more modern times, copper is mainly extracted from copper sulfides such as chalcopyrite and bornite. These can form in a variety of geological environments, from extensional basins where lithospheric plates are drifting apart, to compressional environments where plates are colliding and forming mountain belts. Let's have a look at some of the most important deposit types.
Well, let's start with the extensional environments. I'm visiting south of Spain, the Rio Tinto area of the Iberian Pyrite Belt. And this area is one of the really world famous examples of a deposit type called volcanogenic massive sulfides.
Volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits, also called VMS deposits, form in active rift settings where metal-rich magma forms deep in the crust. When these magmas start to crystallize, the water and other fluids that are dissolved within the magma are released. The heat in the crust also draws in oceanic waters along faults and fractures, and these mix with the magmatic waters. The magmatic fluids themselves can contain many metals already, but the hot fluids will also react with the surrounding ocean floor rocks, picking up more metals. Together, these metal-rich hydrothermal fluids then get transported upwards along faults and fractures in the oceanic crust. Finally, they get near or onto the sea floor via hydrothermal vents. The fluids cool down rapidly as they get near the seafloor, and this causes metallic minerals to precipitate both within the fractured oceanic crust and onto the seafloor, forming a sort of a metallic cap on top of the vent. VMS deposits are polymetallic, meaning that they contain many different types of metals. They are mostly mined for lead, zinc and precious metals, but copper can be the main ore in some deposits like here in Rio Tinto.
But in fact, most of the ore deposits here in the Iberian Pyrite Belt aren't actually pure VMS ores. Many of the ore deposits here show characteristics of another basin-related ore deposit type.
Globally, less than 10% of copper comes from VMS ores. Another 10 to 15% of copper comes from so-called stratobound ores which form in sedimentary basins. Sedimentary basin ores in general are a key source for base metals, particularly lead and zinc, but many are mined chiefly for copper. Basin-hosted sedimentary deposits form when hot hydrothermal fluids within the basement rocks of an active rift basin mobilize metals out of the bedrock. The volumes of fluids involved in this process are huge, so they have a lot of potential to mobilize significant amounts of copper and other metals. These metal-bearing fluids then flow back towards the surface along the normal faults within the rift. The ores are deposited near the faults into the porosity of the basin sediments or at the sea floor. Basin ore deposits are mostly within old sedimentary basins caught up in an ancient mountain belt, so they are now typically highly deformed. That's why you can today find them within continents where the mountain belts once were.
Well, both VMS and sedimentary ores are really very important sources for copper. But the single most important deposit type for copper is the so-called porphyry deposit type.
Over 60% of copper today is mined from porphyry deposits. Porphyry is in fact a specific magmatic rock type with coarse-grained crystals such as feldspar dispersed in a fine-grained ground mass. Not all porphyries carry ores, but if the conditions are right, some porphyry melts can contain significant amounts of metals. Porphyry deposits occur within mountain belts where lithospheric plates collide. In such collision zones, one lithospheric plate dives under or subducts another plate. When this happens, the mantle, which is under the lithosphere, starts melting. These melts can contain metals such as copper and gold. Some of the melt will crystallize along the way, but some of it travels higher in the crust, finally settling as porphyry intrusions, typically somewhere between 5 and 10 kilometers below the surface. The melts that make it this far will contain a lot of water and other vapor phases dissolved into the melt. When a porphyry intrusion is formed in the crust and starts to cool and crystallize, the vapors start to get released from the melt. This results in a build-up of the fluid pressure in the magma chamber, causing extensive fracturing of the cap rock and allowing the hot hydrothermal fluids to enter the fracture porosity. The chemical reactions between the fluids and country rock and the rapid decrease in pressure and temperature causes ore minerals to precipitate from the fluids. Porphyry ore deposits formed in this way can have very large volumes, so they can be economic even at fairly low copper concentrations.
So, as we've seen, copper deposits can form in a variety of tectonic environments. So that's why you can find them pretty much all over the planet.
Copper deposits that formed in rifting basins or in mountain belts are now found close to the Earth's surface due to erosion. Many basins and mountain belts have formed during the billions of years of Earth's history. For example, porphyry deposits are found along modern subduction zones, shown here in pink, and most of the giant copper porphyry deposits are along these modern mountain ranges. But many important porphyry deposits are also found along ancient mountain belts, shown here in purple.
So copper deposits occur all around the globe, but that doesn't mean that we can take the availability of copper for granted.
There are some concerns about the availability of copper, particularly to meet the needs of the energy transition. Copper is easily recyclable, and most scrap copper is already being recycled. But only about 10 million tons of copper becomes available every year via recycling scrap metal. So recycling will not be able to meet even the current demand of more than 25 million tons per year, let alone the continuously increasing demand due to the energy transition. So that puts a huge pressure on finding more copper. There are various small and large copper deposits being developed, and yet more in the feasibility stage of deposit development. However, it typically takes 10 to 15 years to open a mine, and many old mines are already closing, so we might yet be in a situation where copper mining can't meet the growing demand. In addition, political instabilities and other geopolitical factors play a role in copper availability. For example, Wood Mackenzie predicts major deficits in copper between now and 2030, largely due to ongoing unrest in Peru, which is a major copper producer. Even Chile, the world's largest copper producer, recorded a decline of 7% in copper production this year. This is partly due to the fact that Chile and many other places, the best known deposits have already been mined out and the overall ore grades are declining.
So we are going to have to find ways to enhance copper production in the very near future. The need for copper is certainly not going to diminish.